There's a wound you carry that doesn't belong to you alone. It lives in the spaces between your heartbeats, in the pause before you speak your truth, in the way you flinch when love gets too close. This wound has a name, a history, and a lineage that stretches back through generations. Carl Jung understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. The pain we carry isn't just our own. It's inherited, passed down like heirlooms we never asked for, embedded in the very fabric of our being through the first and most profound relationship we ever knew. Your mother's pain became yours before you even drew your first breath. In the sanctuary of her womb, you absorbed not just nutrients and oxygen, but emotions, fears, and unhealed traumas that shape the neural pathways of your developing mind. This isn't about blame. This isn't about pointing fingers at the woman who gave you life. This is about understanding the invisible threads that connect us to our origins, the unconscious patterns that replay themselves across generations until someone brave enough chooses to break the cycle. Jung called it the mother complex, but it's so much more than a clinical term. It's the ghost that haunts your relationships, the voice that whispers, "You're not enough." The invisible hand that guides your choices when you think you're acting freely. Think about the last time you felt truly vulnerable with another person. Did you notice how quickly the walls went up? How swiftly you retreated into familiar patterns of protection? That reflex carries the fingerprints of your earliest relationship. Your mother was your first universe. Her heartbeat was your first music. Her emotions your first weather system. If she was anxious, you learned the rhythm of worry. If she was distant, you learned the language of emotional hunger. If she was overwhelmed, you learned to make yourself small. But here's what Jung knew that few dare to speak. Your mother was carrying her mother's pain too, and her mother before that. Each generation passing down the unprocessed grief, the unspoken fears, the unlived dreams like precious and terrible gifts. The woman who rocked you to sleep was once a little girl herself, hungry for a love she may never have received. The hands that fed you were the same hands that reached desperately for comfort in her own childhood darkness. This is the paradox of the mother wound. The person who is meant to be your greatest source of safety might have been your first encounter with emotional danger. Not because she intended harm, but because she gave what she had, and what she had was shaped by her own unhealed places. You learned love through her lens. If her love was conditional, you've learned to perform for affection. If her love was smothering, you've learned to equate intimacy with suffocation. If her love was absent, you learned to find worth in your own emptiness. These early imprints don't just fade with time. They become the template for every relationship that follows. The partner who pulls away when you get close. The friend who demands constant validation. The boss whose approval you desperately seek. They're all echoes of that first relationship. Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, the shared reservoir of human experience that connects us all. But before we tap into that vast ocean, we must first navigate the more intimate waters of our family unconscious, the specific patterns and wounds that flow through our bloodline. Your mother's unlived dreams became your secret burdens. Her suppressed rage became your inexplicable anger. Her unprocessed grief became your mysterious sadness. Her unfulfilled longings became your restless searching. This transmission happens in ways so subtle they're almost invisible. A glance, a sigh, a moment of withdrawal when you needed presence. The emotional climate of your early years shaped your nervous system more profoundly than any conscious teaching ever could. But recognizing this isn't a life sentence. It's the beginning of freedom. When you understand that the voice criticizing you might not be yours, you can choose whether to listen. When you realize that the fear holding you back might be inherited, you can choose whether to carry it forward. Jung believed that becoming conscious of these patterns was the first step toward healing, not just for ourselves, but for the generations that follow. Every pattern we heal, every cycle we break, every wound we transform creates a different legacy. The mother wound isn't just about mothers and children. It's about the feminine principle itself, the receptive, nurturing, intuitive aspect of human nature that has been wounded in our collective psyche for generations. In a world that has often devalued the feminine, many mothers learn to suppress their own intuitive wisdom, their emotional intelligence, their natural capacity for nurturing. They passed on what they had learned, that feelings were inconvenient, that intuition was unreliable, that nurturing was weakness. This disconnection from the feminine created a hunger that echoes through generations, a longing for the unconditional love, the emotional safety, the intuitive understanding that should have been our birthright. You might recognize this hunger in your own life. The way you search for someone to truly see you. The deep exhaustion that comes from always having to explain yourself. The ache for a love that doesn't require you to be different than you are. But here's the profound truth Jung discovered. The wound and the gift often come from the same source. The sensitivity that makes you feel everything so deeply is the same sensitivity that allows you to connect profoundly with others. The hunger for authentic love is what drives you to create relationships of rare depth and meaning. Your pain has made you permeable to the pain of others. Your wounds have carved space in your heart for compassion. Your search for the love you didn't receive has taught you how to give the love others are seeking. This is the alchemical transformation Jung wrote about. The lead of our suffering can become the gold of our wisdom. The very experiences that wounded us can become the source of our healing power. But this transformation requires conscious participation. It demands that we turn toward our pain with curiosity instead of judgment, that we approach our patterns with compassion instead of criticism. It means sitting with the uncomfortable truth that the person who is supposed to protect you might have been the source of your deepest wounds. It means holding space for the complexity that she both harmed and loved you, often in the same gesture. This isn't about forgiveness in the traditional sense. It's about understanding. It's about seeing your mother not as the all-powerful figure of your childhood, but as a human being carrying her own invisible burdens. When you can see her wounds, you can begin to separate them from your own. When you can understand her limitations, you can stop taking them personally. When you can recognize her humanity, you can reclaim your own. This work isn't easy. It requires you to feel things you've spent a lifetime avoiding. It asks you to question beliefs that have felt like absolute truths. It demands that you hold paradox, that you were both loved and wounded, often simultaneously. But on the other side of this work lies something precious, the ability to love without losing yourself, to be intimate without disappearing, to receive care without becoming dependent. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, requires us to separate from our parental complexes. Not through rejection or rebellion, but through conscious understanding and compassionate differentiation. This means recognizing which thoughts, feelings, and patterns are authentically yours and which ones you inherited. It means choosing consciously what to carry forward and what to transform. You might discover that the anxiety you thought was your personality is actually a learned response to your mother's unspoken fears. That the perfectionism driving you to exhaustion is an attempt to earn a love that should have been freely given. That the walls around your heart were built not by you, but by a frightened child trying to survive. This recognition can be both devastating and liberating. Devastating because it means grieving the childhood you needed but didn't receive. Liberating because it means you're no longer bound by patterns that were never really yours. The healing doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds in layers, like an archaeological dig through your own psyche. Each insight reveals another stratum of understanding, another opportunity for transformation. How do we begin this sacred work? Jung would say, it starts with observation. It's becoming curious about your own patterns instead of simply living them out unconsciously. Notice how you respond when someone gets too close. Do you freeze, fight, or flee? This response carries information about your earliest experiences of intimacy. It's not wrong or right. It's simply data about what your nervous system learned was necessary for survival. Watch how you navigate conflict. Do you disappear into silence, explode with rage, or frantically try to fix everything? These strategies were once brilliant adaptations to your childhood environment. They served you then, but they may be limiting you now. The work requires what Jung called holding the tension of opposites. Your mother both loved and wounded you. She was both powerful and powerless in your young eyes. She was both the source of your pain and your survival. Learning to hold these contradictions without trying to resolve them is the beginning of emotional maturity. It's the capacity to see people as complex human beings, rather than simple archetypes of good or bad. Jung believed that symptoms were often the psyche's attempt to get our attention, to point us toward what needed healing. Your anxiety might be trying to tell you about inherited fear patterns. Your depression might be pointing to suppressed grief that belongs to previous generations. Instead of trying to eliminate these symptoms, what if you got curious about their messages? What if your emotional struggles were actually your psyche's way of guiding you toward the very healing your lineage has been seeking for generations? This reframe transforms you from victim to participant, from broken to breaking through, from powerless to profoundly capable of change. The mother wound often manifests as a deep longing for unconditional love combined with a terror of actually receiving it. When real love appears, it can feel dangerous because it threatens the familiar pain that has become your identity. You might find yourself sabotaging relationships just as they get meaningful. Picking partners who are unavailable or constantly testing people to see if they'll abandon you like you fear they will. These patterns aren't character flaws. They're protective strategies developed by a wise but frightened part of you that learned early that love often came with conditions. That closeness could mean danger, that being seen fully was risky. But awareness changes everything. When you can recognize these patterns as they arise, you can pause and choose differently. You can ask yourself, is this response serving me now? Or is it serving a version of me that no longer needs this level of protection? The healing happens in relationship. Jung knew that we cannot heal in isolation because our wounds were created in relationship. We need the mirror of another person's presence to see ourselves clearly, to practice new ways of being. Jung spoke of the wounded healer, the archetype of someone whose own wounds become the source of their ability to help others. Your pain has sensitized you to pain. Your search for love has taught you how love should feel. Your wounds have carved space in your heart for unprecedented compassion. This doesn't mean your pain was worth it or necessary. It means that since you have experienced it, you can choose to let it become a source of wisdom rather than simply a source of suffering. The work of healing the mother wound is ultimately about reclaiming your right to exist fully, to take up space, to have needs and feelings and desires that matter simply because they're yours. If your early experiences taught you that you were too much or not enough, that your emotions were inconvenient or your needs were burdens, then learning to honor yourself becomes a radical act of healing. This might mean setting boundaries with people who drain your energy, even if they're family members. It might mean speaking your truth even when your voice shakes. It might mean asking for what you need instead of hoping others will intuit it. Each act of self-honoring creates new neural pathways, new possibilities for how you move through the world. You're literally rewiring your brain for a different kind of existence. Jung understood that the goal isn't to eliminate all traces of our early experiences, but to integrate them consciously. Your sensitivity, born from early wounds, becomes a gift when it's no longer unconscious reactivity, but conscious awareness. Your fierce independence, developed to survive emotional neglect, becomes healthy autonomy when it's balanced with the capacity for interdependence. The very qualities that have caused you pain can become your greatest strengths when they're brought into consciousness and balanced with self-awareness. This transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's a spiral journey, circling back to the same themes at deeper levels. Each time you encounter an old pattern, you have the opportunity to respond with greater wisdom and compassion. Be patient with yourself in this process. The patterns you're healing have been decades in the making. They won't dissolve simply because you understand them intellectually. They need to be felt, witnessed, and gradually transformed through repeated experiences of conscious choice. Remember that healing happens in layers. First comes awareness, then acceptance, then gradual transformation. Each layer reveals new depths of understanding, new opportunities for liberation. Jung believed that the unconscious is always working toward wholeness, always seeking to heal what has been fragmented. Trust that your psyche knows how to heal, that your awareness is evidence of this healing force already at work within you. The mother wound is ultimately a wound of disconnection from yourself, from your authentic emotions, from your deepest knowing. Healing, it means coming home to yourself in the fullest sense. It means trusting your inner voice, honoring your emotional truth, and allowing yourself to be seen in your full complexity and beauty. This homecoming to yourself creates the foundation for all other relationships. When you can love yourself with the unconditional acceptance you once needed from your mother, you become capable of both giving and receiving love in ways that honor everyone's wholeness. You become the ancestor your descendants will thank, the one who chose healing over repetition, consciousness over unconsciousness, love over fear. The wound may not have been yours originally, but the healing is yours to claim. And in claiming it, you set not only yourself free, but countless others who will benefit from the courage of your consciousness. If this message touched you, comment. I choose to break the cycle.